Vignesh is already streaming it on YouTube on the.
Yes.
Yeah.
This should be an absorbing
meeting
session.
is now
right,
streaming on
Captain?
the live on YouTube. It says it.
Yes,
Captain?
it is.
Is it likely to be an absorbing session?
That you must decide. Let's see the session. I mean, we hope so. I mean, we plan our own session so that we are absorbing. Yeah, we are on time. Now, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I go on to introduce our speaker, let me have permit me to have a 2-minute commercial. It's required because many of the, as you are just hearing, many participants at times don't know what exactly Colors of Glory is. Colors of Glory Foundation is the first ever initiative of this kind in India, where the objective of the organization is to promote awareness of military heritage. This has been in existence for the last 3 years, and our website is www.colorsofglory.org. You can get every detail there. If I go on explaining now, it will be, I'll be slicing into the time we have for the speaker. I would only say that, you can be involved with Colors of Glory much more closely by taking a membership. Membership details are also, the procedure to taking a membership and the fees, etc., are also available on the website. Now I'll go on to, today we have been trying to project the warfare in Indian context, the multiple facets of the warfare in Indian context through our various events which we've been doing on these virtual meetings. This time we have chosen a unique subject, which is not exactly the guns and soldiers. Instead, media and information, which I'm sure is, as I can see the number of participants coming up, it's generating a lot of interest. We have a scholar on the topic, very background, adequately qualifies him for this talk. Let me introduce our speaker, please. This is Dr. Ramakrishnan Ramani, holds a doctoral degree in Defense and Strategic Studies from the University of Madras. Besides a PG Diploma in Journalism and Mass Communication. The thesis for his Ph.D. was on military media relations in context to fourth-generation warfare. Commencing his career as a journalist with the New Indian Express, he has transcended many an associated field, strategizing communication and content for various purposes: media, corporate communication, brand, marketing, and learning. He has worked as a senior researcher on military and market developments in Asia and Europe, and with keen interest on technological innovation, has published global reports on military technology. Dr. Ramani has published over 17 papers in peer-reviewed journals and books, and has presented papers in national and international seminars. He also offers guest lectures at the University of Madras and for the Tamil Nadu Police. That's Dr. Ramakrishnan Ramani for you, ladies and gentlemen. All yours, Ram.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen and then let us start. Yes, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, the topic of my brief presentation today is on media and information warfare within the Indian context, right? This is basically a small part of a doctoral thesis that I did, which, as Captain Ramachandran just said, is on fourth-generation warfare. So it also includes the aspect of media relationship with terrorists, with backslides, and with the other side, as we could generally say. Why did I choose this topic? Because whether we are at war or we are not at war, right? There is always some activity that's happening. There's always some conflict, and more often than not, this conflict is on the information sphere, right? It is often in parallel to conventional operations, and many times it defense ingredients. And this concept of this type of warfare is growing rapidly across the world. Now that said, quickly about my presentation, I would just take about 40-45 minutes. I have divided this into 4 clear categories or 4 parts. There are some quotes that I have gathered or are present here, which were taken during my primaries when I was doing my research. I hope they are provocative enough to kind of evince a little bit of discussion at the end of the presentation. So yes, let us start with this. This is very deliberate that I put Arnab Goswami's picture on this slide because, you know, he's kind of trending right now. Right. So that said, information warfare, part 1.
Can you request everyone to mute? Somebody is making some kind of noise.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you could please mute yourselves, it will be very helpful. Okay. Like every academic endeavor, let me start by giving you a brief definition of what information warfare is, or what are the activities that happen around this, right? So for those of you who are actually viewing this on a mobile phone and not able to see what's written here on the PPT, I'll quickly read it out for you. Information warfare basically involves actions taken to preserve the integrity of one's own information systems from exploitation, corruption, or destruction, while at the same time exploiting, corrupting, or destroying an adversary's information system, and in the process achieving information advantage, right? It also involves actions taken to achieve information superiority. Quickly going by the key aspects of defining what information warfare is. So we're saying about, when you're talking about information here, it can be battlefield information, it can be strategic level information, it can also be information at the societal level. There are multiple aspects to this. Interestingly, our very friendly neighbors have since time immemorial, that here's a very popular quote from Sun Tzu's work, The Art of War, where he says, all warfare is based on deception, right? So that being said, what are the key terms or terminologies that are involved with information warfare? And I think the next slide is pretty interesting because it gives you a perspective. So if you put together a word cloud, as they say, about information warfare, the most interesting terms appear here are cyberspace, electronics, technology, disinformation, elections, social, mining, institution, misleading, jamming, spoofing. You'll see that this actually permeates across different levels, different segments of war fighting, right? You have your tactical information, you have your battlefield level information, you have strategic information, information which is basically about management of war, and you have the societal level. You're talking of elections here, public opinion, citizens, bribery, so on and so forth. So information warfare is actually ubiquitous in nature. It's all pervasive. Right? So that being said, let us look at certain divisions of information warfare. I kind of categorize into 3 clear divisions here, as most people are kind of aware of it. You have cyber warfare on the very left, or let me read it out to you at the textual level here. Electronic warfare, which consists of electronic support measures, electronic countermeasures, and countermeasures. You have the psychological operations, which include perception management, public information, public diplomacy, amongst other things. And then you have the cyber space, right? You have cyber warfare, which includes attacking computer networks, exploiting, which includes again all elements of command and control, and C4ISR, right? And as you know, right, there have been so many examples of cyber warfare happening. You have the example of the US attack on Iran's nuclear program. You have Arab Spring, which they say is again, you know, what is an offspring of information warfare. You have the Syrian issue again, which involves a lot of information warfare. US elections, what about Donald Trump and what the Russians did? I don't know how much of it's true or false. There's a lot of debate going around. But yes, that too can be considered under the gambit of information warfare. Now that said, let's look at some very prominent Indian examples, right? Let's start with good old Puranas. I'm sure you all know what this is, right? This is that famous episode in the Mahabharata war, the 18-day war, when, you know, when Yudhishthira just said one statement, Ashwatthama is dead. And that predominant silence of what it was, which it actually was an elephant, was actually information that was, you know, denied or corrupted. So what actually happened, as you all know, was Ashwatthama, the elephant, was killed by Bhima, whom you see here on the screen. But Dronacharya mistook to be his own son Ashwatthama, and because of that, he lost the will to fight. He laid down his weapons, and you know what happened after that, right? One of the very first examples of information warfare being put to good use. Another example, 1971. I mean, India was very good in conducting media blitzkrieg operation within India and overseas, which kind of helped build the tide in favor of India in conducting the war, and this paid rich dividends for us. Very recently, July 1999, you see Barka that year standing in front of the famous Bofors guns, firing away at Tiger Hill. Now, is this real media coverage? Was this an operation done in sync with the Indian Army? It's still open to speculation, but however, it did pay off a good dividend for us, because Kargil war today is a word that everybody in every village in India is aware of, right? I'm not sure how many people are aware of the 1971 war, but if you talk of Kargil war, almost everybody in India is aware of this, down to the most remotest of villages, right? So that's a good job done by the media for India. Kashmir, right? Propaganda from both sides. I mean, I'm playing a neutral game here. You have propaganda from the Indian government. You have propaganda from the Pakistani side as well. I am not deliberately covering social media here, because then if you bring in that, you have names such as Burhan Wani and other people who have been, doctored to be the faces of militants in Kashmir, right? So here are just some examples of information warfare on the battlefield, off the battlefield, as it is seen in India. Now, that being said, let's go to part 2. Who are the protagonists here? Okay. So, as I said in my 3-pillar approach of information warfare, we are looking at the central pillar, which is psychological warfare. What does this consist of? It consists of public information, perception management, public diplomacy, amongst many other things. Due to lack of space, I just put these three elements here, right? And why is this important? Because if you consider the Clausewitzian theory, which is basically the government, the people, and the armed forces, which is still a very predominant paradigm that we consider today, the media is the common thread. It cuts across, it rather helps communicate all these 3 aspects here, that one seamless common thread, right? Which carries information. So you have information from the government to the people, from the people back to the government in form of opinion and response, likewise from the armed forces to the people and backwards. So the media is the common thread, and thus it makes the media the very, very important partner for the government, from the armed forces when it's fighting its battle. Let's go further down. What is the media landscape today? We are all familiar with what the various elements of media, right? We have the radio, we have the print media, we have television, and then this media is available across all devices, right? You have it in your mobile phones, you have it in your iPads, in your tabs, and your computers, everywhere. And then in addition to conventional media, you also have this huge spread of social media, right? You have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, syndicated feeds, Google, Pinterest. I mean, it's there. So the icons that you see below are the popular social media channels that almost every news channel, news organization uses, in addition to its traditional platform in which it delivers news. Okay. Going forward, why is it dangerous to always, trust the media? So since the media is a very important partner for the armed forces, for the government, why is it important? Why is it, pretty dangerous? So why should we take it with a pinch of salt? One, the social media source for news. Just as I said here, that mainstream media coverage is generated direct from social media content. True. In social media, who are your journalists? It's most often done than not your citizen journalist, right? So if I'm out on the streets and I see some action happening, I immediately capture it on my mobile phone, on the camera on my mobile phone. I share it on WhatsApp, and it spreads, it's viral, right? So the citizen journalist is very, very important, and this kind of tends to put a lot of action, right, out of context, right? That is one. The second is SEO dissemination. Truth versus reality. The online narrative is dominated by who has the best SEO. This is what marketing experts do today, right? On Google, if you search for a particular topic, right, what is it that comes on the first, on Google page number 1 at the very top link? All this is driven by Google's algorithm, and being amongst the most popular search platforms or portals, it's always more often than not the SEO game. Who keeps trending, who keeps saying the same thing again and again and again in such a way that that small sound becomes a humongous noise that people tend to follow. And the third thing is celebrity culture, right? Armchair warriors, as we kind of say, armchair commentators, keyboard warriors, and celebrity culture. Almost everybody tends to say that they're an expert of a certain topic. Let me give a very, very interesting example here. When Indian Airlines IC-814 was hijacked, right, to Kandahar, some very popular journals, they immediately brought in experts to say what the government will do, what the government should do, should not do, what will be the impact in terms of, the brand image for India and so on and so forth. This one particular channel, I don't want to name the channel, brought in such experts to their studio. One particular expert in the aviation industry finally turned out after some amount of research that he used to manufacture bulbs that were bought by various airline service providers. But he was basically an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer for a particular company, either Airbus or Boeing. Similarly, there was another expert who was supposed to be a psychologist. I'm sorry. It turned out to be that he was a medical equipment salesman. So are these people really experts, right? So it's always good to take some of this information, with a bit of salt. Now, that being said, let us look at the modus operandi, right? What actually happens? How does the media get these kind of official news about what's happening? Like now, we hear a lot of news about, what's happening in Ladakh, about China. Interesting now in Pakistan, is there going to be a civil war in Pakistan? Past couple of days, the media's been silent on this, but social media has been raving about what's been happening. Most often than not, this is how information tends to flow.
Sorry, Ram, have you put it on slideshow? Because, it is superimposing our, instead of the complete slide cannot be seen.
Okay.
Our image.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So you want me to put it like this?
Yes.
Is it better now?
Yeah, that way it should be.
Okay, so let me just slightly expand this. I hope it's better. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so
otherwise, your slide is being covered by the images. Of the people.
Yeah. Achha,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
so
sorry.
as I just said, this is the modus operandi. News typically tends to flow just like water from a higher level to a lower level. So you have the Ministry of Defense, the Raksha Mantri, who initiates the communication. It's percolated to the various departments and organizations at the ministry, in the armed forces, down to the media. Now let us see what are these important organizations that are involved in this before we get into the actual dynamics of the relationship. Basically trying to understand who the key players are, right? The source of defense news, and I have kind of listed three key organizations here. I'm sorry, the two is a typo. The first is the Directorate of Public Relations, or DPR, which is headed by a senior civilian officer of the Ministry of Defense. Okay. The second is the Army Liaison Cell, and the third is the Additional Directorate General of Public Information. Right. During the 1990s, there was a new department that was basically created for psychological operations, and this was known as the Army Liaison Cell. Earlier, it was known as MI-24, or Directorate 24 of Military Intelligence. One of the additional tasks that they were given, apart from tactical military intelligence, right, is also to share information with the media, both for conveyance to the civilian population and also for for psychological operations and so on, especially in the area in which they are operating. Right. This is basically a media management. They basically also tend to manage media in various conflict zones. And I believe that the Army Liaison Cell is headed at the brigadier level. Right. In addition, sometime around 2018, 17, 18, the then COAS General Bipin Rawat kind of said that, the Indian Armed Forces, especially the Army, is kind of a little old school in its approach to the media and sharing information with the public at large. In this regard, I think he initiated ADGPI, the Additional Director General of Public Information. Now, it's very interesting because this comes under the Director General of Military Intelligence again. And as I said, started somewhere around 2018. Let us go into this a little bit into detail. I'll share the screens with you. Right? But first, let's look at the DPR because it started sometime during the 1990s. Headquartered in the South Block in New Delhi, this is the official communication organ of the Ministry of Defense, right? It has, at that time, it had about 25 regional offices. I believe it's gone up a little more now. This is slightly dated from my sources. It helps, provide PR coverage or press releases to the Army, Navy, Air Guard within their general region of operations. There are 16 regional offices which are headed by armed forces officers. Okay, and just as I said, the Army also has it under its own setup, the ADGPA. Okay, so what is the role, or what was the role of the DPR? Initially, it started off as a nodal agency. Okay, it started off as a nodal agency for disseminating information. It's responsible for providing media support to ensure wide publicity. So it's kind of like your point of contact for various media organizations. It facilitates media interaction with leadership and across the armed forces. In addition to that, it does some extra work, such as it helps train journalists. It provides publication, it broadcasts. It also manages events and takes care of various photo archives. So what is the function of the DPR? It's very, very interesting because apart from the roles and responsibilities, there seems to be a dichotomy within this organization itself. And I find it pretty interesting. Despite being an organization that serves the Ministry of Defense and helps project the armed forces, it's totally under civilian control, right? The civilian director controls the functioning with the Army PRO and those details. The director is incidentally the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense, but the director is selected from the Indian Information Service. Okay, and he is the spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense. Though the communication that is required is initiated by the Raksha Mantri, it kind of has to be vetted by the DPR or the civilian control before it is percolated to various media organizations. And sometimes it's a bit funny because even service chiefs, right, they need permission from the directorate to speak to the media, despite the fact being, I think the service chiefs are at the cabinet secretary level in terms of their peers. While these people are kind of given a slightly free rein, the service chiefs tend to, be strictly regulated in what they say. Here's a very interesting example that I shared on screen. When Major General Arjun Ray wanted to, publish his book in the Foreign Correspondence Club, his book titled Kashmir Diary, Psychology of Militancy, I believe at the very last minute, after inviting all journalists and everybody at the venue, there was a phone call from the directorate saying that, sir, please stop. I mean, we do not want you to go ahead with this publication, or at least, instantly the publication and definitely with the release of the publication before journalists. So there seems to be a bit of a dichotomy there, right? What is the functioning of the ADGPA? As very clearly stated here on the screen, the primary function is to release press releases. It takes care and monitors various media relationship. It takes care of information release, the image of the armed forces, very important perception management, especially in areas like Kashmir and the Northeast. It also takes care of operational publicity on social media because you'll see a lot of tweets, Facebook posts and all that basically coming from this handle that you see here at ADGPA, right? Apart from that, it also supplies information to the Chief of Army Staff, the VCOAS, the DGMI and DGMO with respect to various important issues, especially public perception and so on. So it also helps in upward flow of information to the key stakeholders in the armed forces. As I said again, media perception management, advisory to the Chief of Army Staff, what they need to say, how they need to say, whether certain information is right to be said at a particular point of time or not, so on and so forth. Interestingly, they also host and maintain the Indian Army website. Yes, they work with the National Informatics Center or NIC, and they are in direct relationship with this particular government organization in hosting the content and in maintaining the way the website is. And of course, they represented Army in various inter-ministerial groups with respect to perception management within the government itself. So what is the aim of all this at the end of the day? The aim is basically, as Colonel P.N. Kera says here, the aim is to focus attention on the nation in general through the media that the Army is well equipped, thoroughly trained, highly motivated to take on our adversaries, and most important, an example of national integration. The troops of the Indian Army represent every part of India, speak different language, belong to different cultures and ethnic groups, but are dedicated to a common goal of national integrity and sovereignty. Brilliant statement, wonderful statement. But towards the end of this presentation, you might see certain questions raised in this regard. And I would like to quote another officer with whom I did my primaries and whom I quoted in my thesis to kind of give his perspective on it. Now, that being said, let's go to the next section, the third part of the dynamics, or the most important part of this presentation. Right. Okay. So, what basically stalls good communication from reaching the media, or why is it that the media tends not to be very happy with whatever is being given to them? I see that there are two critical reasons for this. The us versus them syndrome, as I like to say. One is the Ministry of Defense very structure, and second, the hallowed tradition or the mindset of the armed forces, right? Often you would see that in the ministry, there tends to be a dichotomy, if I may say so, between the bureaucracy, the civilian side versus the officer, the people who are actually there on the front, the people who are actually doing the job, right? And on the other side, you have the tradition of the armed forces. Since since the British days, there's always been this elitist, perception that the civilians probably do not need to know whatever is happening. Unfortunately, if you want to talk of a relationship with the media, if you're going to talk of psychological operations, where the media is going to be a key partner, when you're talking of perception management related to various media platforms that you would like to leverage, right? You got to trust the media in some part. You got to kind of take them as a partner. So handing them brochures, conducting walkthroughs and all that probably is not what the media would be interested in. Let's see that to some more greater detail. What are the operational limitations that the armed forces currently have? As I just said, a colonial mindset probably of the organization, an elitist perception that we need to share only what we want to share type of things. There are also limiting protocols based on such a mindset and certain operational requirements like the SAO 15S81 or the Army Rule or AR21, which basically gives you guidelines as to what armed forces need to say. If I can quote Lieutenant General R.K. Nanavati, they say that that is the defense PROs, tend to lack aptitude and communication skills and motivation sometimes, because being an army PRO is not one of those, very niche or looked up to assignments. And that their preparation and training gives a great deal of room for environment. So this is one of the words from a senior retired officer. And of course, you can't totally mistake what he says, because there are a lot of tactical and operational issues that go into this that tends to limit what the armed forces can tend to say. Right? But that said, and then what's the media's agenda? Will they tend to buy what the army says? Because the media is a totally different ball game. It's a totally different organism, if I may say so. Well, the armed forces survives, or the reason for the armed forces is to do a certain task, a certain job. The media's reason for existence is totally different. What is their agenda? I think it's best quoted from what Alka Saxena, who's currently the managing editor of Express News Channel, what she has to say. And I'm quoting her from one of her articles. She says, from the time a reporter joins a channel, he or she is told, masala wala maal lao, tabhi fir air mein jayega. So basically bring juicy stories, only then it will go into air, right? News basically has to sell. This line is made to sink into every reporter's DNA as soon as they hit the floor. And often that was the case with me too when I was with Indian Express. So that is what he or she is on the lookout for. The style of talking, the presentation, the attitude, all these are determined by this one fact. And if you kind of tend to notice what's happening on news channels today, whether it's Times Now, whether it's Republic, NDTV, any of these news channels, right? The type of stories they take, the tone that they use, the language that they speak, the emphatic language that they use. All this kind of at the end tends to show only one key thing. What is it that news has to sell? And at the bottom line, it's profitability. So if I can again quote Lieutenant General R.K. Nanavati in his work, Army Media Relations in Subconventional Conflict, he says, commerce, the saleability of the news, competition and ratings drive the media. Being first, breaking news, being exclusive, and being able to attribute the news. So this is what the news needs. And ladies and gentlemen, if you notice, the idea is to be exclusive. They need to be there first. They need to say it first. They'll have a piece of a printout of some email that they get and say, we have official documents of a certain news leakage from the source, blah, 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 all that. Basically trying to be emphatic, saying that they are the people. So it's a question of, who tends to break the news first. And end of the day, it has to sell. Right. Let me kind of emphasize upon this with a case study that I did. This is 26/11, right? Mumbai attacks, case in point. The attack has been commercially beneficial to the media. If you study how the media perform financially, obviously to very high TRP ratings, almost every household has the news channel running. High TRP rate translates to high profit margins because more advertisement air and so on, right? And such incidents create opportunities for a media frenzy because from one source you tend to derive many other things. So from the actual attack, from understanding who the terrorist is, immediately you'll get an armchair journalist who says, this is the psychology of a terrorist. They quote multiple references. They draw human interest stories. So they'll probably show the body of a victim laying on the floor, and they'll immediately start dissecting or conducting autopsy on how the person would have died, what would be the effect on his family, things that are probably not related. And how does this all actually reflect on the finances? Here I given two channels here, a national channel and a regional channel, NDTV and Sun TV. And if you notice the dates in which they kind of showcased it, you can kind of see their BSE, the graph going up in their stock markets, right, in BSE. So I have not taken NSE here, I just taken the Bombay Stock Exchange. That's just one case in point. Okay, so getting into the dynamics now, right? So how does the media kind of relate to, and how does the media actually operate? For one, they need timely access to in-depth information, right? So news cannot be stale. As I said, it's all about breaking news. They need to be first. They need to be as comprehensive as they can. They tend to dedicate some resources to this as best as they can. They always want a human angle while covering these stories because every conflict has a human angle to it, especially take it a terrorist incident, take it Jammu and Kashmir, take it the Northeast, take it even the Naxalite problem, right? Or take it to our neighborhood in the South in Sri Lanka when the LTT problem was there. There's always a human angle to it, and human interest stories sell the best, right? However, there are problems here. Threat to life, for example. So journalists always also kind of tend to take a back step when it comes to issues related to safety and security, especially on the battlefield. There's a conflict of interest. The armed forces vis-a-vis the media. So the armed forces, as I said, they don't tend to reveal much. The media, they need to get as much as possible. But when you're covering a conflict like Kashmir, right, a fourth generation engagement vis-a-vis good old third generation engagement like Kargil, right, there's a problem in maintaining balance. What is this balance? Because at the end of the day, journalists tend to take sides. If you look at the Kashmir issue, if you look at a lot of local reporters, local journalists, they tend to side, or the tone of their reportage tend to be a little soft on the terrorist issue. You all would be very familiar what happened when Burhan Wani, was the encounter that killed him. You're all familiar with what happened during the stone building incident and so on. What is the tone of language that they use? How are these stories reported? What are the pictures they tend to take? So it's very difficult to maintain balance, and this kind of tends to flow down to the readers as well, right? So that's a problem. Again, in a protracted engagement, financial issues is a problem. As I said, again, I mean, a lot of things kind of tend to be or seem to be repetitive. They need to be exclusive. And the media always wants to cover multiple perspectives, whether it's third generation or a fourth generation engagement. It's a conventional kind of conflict or non-conventional type of conflict. So this small cartoon here kind of tends to represent that in a funny but a very interesting and fruitful way. So moving on further, the Press Council of India kind of gives their statement on this thing. They say that the media has an adversarial role to the extent that it questions authority, in fact, all authority, to look at the other side, right? Because the media, they tend to be unbiased, as they say. This must be understood, and a relationship of creative tension must be accepted as a democratic necessity. For the rest, they, that is the military and the media, are partners in trying to build a better society and a stronger nation. This is a very unbiased, a very, what do you say, a very hallowed type of statement. But does this actually happen? So how is this relationship today? Okay. If you notice that the relationship is pretty delicate, it's based on multiple factors. It's based on issues as how the media or how the armed forces tend to treat the media. It also depends on how the media interacts with the armed forces. What is the type of language they use? How is the relationship with the reporter, with the spokesperson on the ground? How do they get information during peace times with regards to many other aspects of the armed forces, not just conflict related, so on and so forth. Apart from what's happening here that you hear, whether it's the TRP scam with Republic TV or any other issue, ultimately both institutions are professional, right? They need to meet the bottom line at the end of the day, whatever the bottom line is. There are different characteristics in terms of organization, in terms of functioning. The drivers are different. The limitations are also different, right? The armed forces tend to operate on a purely military basis. For the media, it's absolutely exposure. 2611 is again one of the examples that I often quote, in which the media tend to leverage it for better commercial outcome, and they kind of also tend to kind of go a bit beyond what was required. We all know how the Pakistani handlers of the terrorists at 2611 actually saw various news broadcasts and were able to give tactical information to the terrorists inside, right? So this actually brings the key question: can the media be trusted completely? So on one side, you have the issue of, will the media be a compliant partner? Can you manage the media? Often the media does not like that term called media management. But even if you want to use that language, can they be used as a partner? Because many times they tend to go overboard with enthusiasm and their own agenda. Okay, so this leads us to the fourth and the final part of this presentation. Is there a happily ever after? I would like to quote an IDSA research scholar, Ajay K. Rai, who beautifully sums this up, and I tend to go with what he says and what needs to be the future. Basically, he said there are three elements to this. The first is that there is no such thing as niche information. Information is never niche. It can always be out. The compartments of information into command, public, or niche group informations are becoming increasingly blurred. Information campaigns must be targeted to all groups that were mentioned above. Second, in a global village, information ought to be both the principle of war as well as useful for conflict resolution. And with more information empowering the individual, power now vests with the people, especially in a democratic setting, right? So there's this very interesting example. If you have nuclear weapons and the intent is very much known, right? That you have it, it must be known to the enemy and the enemy's people, right? To whomever you are kind of posture your power. If you're going to hold this as a secret, what's the point? I mean, hidden information is not useful in perception management. Thirdly, the new environment is engendering a new universal morality, and by implication, a new media morality which does not respect the old school and professional taboos and national borders like their predecessors, which basically translate that information is ubiquitous. So much as we would want to curtail information, it's all out there. For example, we have Danish, right? A very young members of the Colors of Glory. I am sure this young gentleman knows what is the order of battle of the Indian Armed Forces, what is the strength of each squadron, where is our strike corps located, where are the different commanders, who's holding what post, so on and so forth. It's all out there in the media. It's just the person's personal interest to gather that information. But what is a secret is the intent and the timing and the actual details of when it's going to be used. Right? When Google launched Google Maps, Google Earth, and when you could actually zoom down into Mumbai Harbor and you could see various naval ships, you could zoom down into Visakhapatnam Harbor and see various ships there in harbor, right? It immediately raised the hue and crest. My God, I mean, nothing is a secret anymore. The common man can see where all our military assets are. But that's fine. When is it going to be used and how it's going to be used is still private information, right? So that is the only thing. But that being said, almost everything else is out there. So the armed forces need to know what can be shared and how it should be shared with the public, because obviously information cannot be kept a secret for long, right? But what's happening now? With that being said, unfortunately, the armed forces still believe in having a well-orchestrated and choreographed visit. So they take them to certain areas of conflict, saying, this is how it is. We are having the upper hand, so on and so forth. High-class hospitality, wine and dine journalists. Do journalists actually buy into that? From what I hear from my peers, former colleagues in the media, no, they don't tend to buy that. Handouts. So you give them a sheet of paper and say, this is the official report. Yeah, sure, they'll publish it. Why not? But then they'll always send it with a question mark and not with a full stop, saying that this is what the government says, this is what the armed forces say, but is this the information? Is this really true, or is that wrong? Just does not work. What the journalists want, as I said in the lower part of the screen, is they want more interactive sessions. It's not just tutored information, right? So they need to sit with you, speak to you, gather information. They need to have access to multiple information sources, not just one spokesperson. And most often they want the feeling of being partnered. It's not just a use and throw equipment, right? You don't just use them and then say, okay, please see me at some other date when I can give you some of my time. It's not like that. They have to be partners, and they need to be considered as partners. I would like to quote another person, Colonel Dhanveer Singh, who was very popular in social media, and he was also one of the contacts during my primaries, during my doctoral program. He says that journalists demand ever more information on this raging subject, of covering conflict. But the military, on the other hand, on the contrary, pitches in all skills to deny, deflect, and they try their best to hold on to information that it actually cannot prevent from floating free. Just what I said 2-3 slides ago, right? So information cannot be curtailed for long. This has literally led to a sort of rivalry between the news media and the military. So another statement from this gentleman. And I would actually like to give one more quote of his, which is slightly more, if I may say, little more old-fashioned, right? He again says that it would be fair to say that the Indian Army is largely infantry and is technologically backward by any global standards. They largely operate in counterinsurgency, LOC and LOAC environments. Predominantly, conventional operations are based on attrition, which is second-generation conflicts, rather than maneuvering, which is third generation. The change of mindset in dealing with the fourth generation, he says, is still far-fetched. As a veteran, I would rather say our military is still vintage and in second generation mindset, with some capability to conduct third generation operations. The realization of a fourth generation kind of operation in which the state loses its monopoly over war is yet to dawn upon us. And if I may extrapolate that, when he says state loses its monopoly over war, it's also the monopoly over information. So with that, what would I tend to recommend? Again, from this very brief, close to 40-minute presentation. Here are my recommendations. There is definitely a need in the change of mindset of the military. Old school thought of giving handouts, conducting boardroom kind of meetings does not hold good, right? You need to really partner with the journalists, with the media organization. You need to align the military to the changing media scenario. You need to improve the quality of communication. So as I said again, not just handouts, but they need to be partnered with. You need to show and tell and engage with the media. This is especially important because of the devolution of news distribution as well. Gone are the days of Doordarshan, right? Which held monopoly over news. I mean, you have today a dime a dozen news channels, whether it is television, whether it's internet. You have people writing blogs, perspectives. The good old WhatsApp in your mobile phone is a very, very powerful news studio, right? You get half-baked news, raw news, which builds up. Add to that, you have these things called memes, funny takes over various events, various incidences, which over a consistent period of time tend to change the perception of the beholder, of the viewer, the person who reads that or watches the news, right? On the other side, it's also important to sensitize the news media and military affairs. So just like in the case of 2611, it's necessary for the news media also to know what can be shared at what time, to what level, and how. That's very, very important. And activities by the DPR in conducting a workshop for the media is a very welcome step in this regard. And finally, I mean, it's a very cooperative approach. Right? End of the day, the media is doing its job, the armed forces is doing its job. While it's very important to fight the enemy at the front, at the borders, it's also very, very important to find not fight, but to win the hearts of the people back home. Because at the end of the day, for whom are we fighting for? Right? It's for the citizen of this country. It's for this nation. Right? So that being said, the media and the armed forces need to understand that this is a collaborative approach, and it's not one person kind of tends to follow the other. So with that, I would like to kind of conclude my very brief presentation. It took about 35-40 minutes. And if there are any questions, please shoot. Thank you.
Please can unmute yourself and ask your question. Please go
Mr.
ahead.
Mr. Ramakrishnan Ramani, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir.
Now, what's the role of the National Security Agency in all this? NSA.
Is to keep mum.
Sorry?
See, regarding the NSA, I'm very well versed actually to answer that question. But from what I get to understand, when it comes to perception management, when it comes to what news can be shared, they also probably tend to have a say. But I cannot confirm that because I have not studied that subject yet.
Thank you. Is there any leak of security information in all this?
In whatever I just shared?
Yeah, I mean, from the Defense Department to the media,
Okay.
can it be any kind of the information, the almost the classified information leaks out? Does it?
Do they leak
Classified
out?
information?
Do they leak out? Yes. Sometimes they do.
Then what do we do? Classified information should be classified. It cannot be declassified.
Obviously, yes. But
So how do you ensure that totally private and confidential information does not leak out to the media?
Can I answer that, Ram?
Yes, sir.
See, every armed forces, all of us who serve in the armed forces, are governed by the Official Secrets Acts. The court-martial offense if you leak out any information. So there is no question of any information going out unless he's ready for a court-martial and or suit. So that way, armed forces are pretty well sealed. But yes, leaks do happen because as you heard in cases of espionage and all, there are people are lured by money. Very, very rare instance it has happened. But if they're caught, they're in for that. Otherwise, with the Official Secrets Acts, leakage of information from the.
No, when you sorry.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Now, can you put out this information that we are still in the second or third generation only and not yet come to the fourth generation stage? Will it not demoralize the army?
It is a discussion. You see, it is not. It's not demoralizing or anything. We got to discuss what is the defense situation, what is the condition of the armed forces. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not for. Unless we look at things practically and what is happening, how will we improve? There's nothing wrong with that.
This is in the public domain. Even the citizens will get demoralized. Our army is not as modern as the Chinese army or the Pakistani army. Then what do we do?
We are not comparing with them. We are only saying what our state is. Open a comparison, it's totally different.
End of the day, sir, these quotes are very subjective, right? There is no official statement from the Chief of Army Staff or from the Ministry of Defense. These are perspectives of officers who are retired, and these are perspectives based on their experience. They aren't shared official information. They are not sharing technological information that are still privy to a select few.
Don't you think it should be totally confidential, this kind of information?
I do not think so, sir. I think these rather trigger healthy discussion, especially among the academia. Now it's a question of whether it's an important discussion or not. So if you ask an academician or if you ask a journalist, they'll be willing to discuss everything under the sun, right? And such a topic will be of obvious interest to them, since it's always a comparative study that we tend to do when it comes to armed forces. But is this official? Is this classified information? I do not think so. Look at it this way. So look at it this way. How would you try to define the engagement we have in China? How do you tend to define the operations we had with Pakistan, 48, 65, 71, Kargil? Under what category do? And again, talking of these generations of warfare, which are again terms that are brought by military scholars, right?
Yeah.
So it's again somebody's definition, but you always need a definition. You always need a structure to take a dialogue in a certain direction. So that being said, I do not think it's again a perspective.
Hmm. So we're all proud of the Indian Army. So
Obviously.
that kind of a pride must be maintained at any cost.
Absolutely, sir. Beshan. No doubt.
Mr. Ramakrishnan, I
So,
have two questions.
so
One is regarding the the other militaries in the world. They have the embedded media. That concept does not exist here. Okay, that's one. And the I forgot the second question. I'll come to that. I'm talking of embedded media.
yes, sir.
So we don't have that concept.
We don't, sir.
We do
We
not permit.
we do not permit, sir.
Yeah.
Uh,
Having said that, in fact, being in the service, I've interacted a lot with media. I would say most of them are ignorant of what they've come for. They really do not know what it is all about. That means the homework is so incomplete. If he comes to a fighter squadron or a fighter base, he has no clue what is happening on a fighter base and what it is. At least you must know that. You must know the aircraft. You must know the weapon system. Everything, like you mentioned, is open source information. 95% of any weaponry, it's open source. Any intelligent guy will be able to do it. But how he makes intelligence of the information is a different matter altogether. Okay. So that homework is not there. So you really don't know on what wavelength can you speak to that fellow and answer it, because some of the questions are so basic that you don't feel like answering, because that's the kind of ignorance. So these are the issues which are involved. It can be interactive provided there is a party which knows its subject.
True, sir. And that's a problem I think that the media has, sir. For the simple reason, it's a question of resources. Today in the private world, we talk of multitasking. Media organizations do not have the luxury of having a finite number of journalists dedicated for the armed forces or for defense, be it or for international relations. More often than not, a reporter tends to cover multiple beats, as they say, right? It can be the defense today, it will be health issue tomorrow, or it can be a food security issue the day after. On the fifth day, it could be an issue of law and order. So he or she tends to cover multiple beats, and that gives them very scant time to do their homework, actually. But that being said, sir, I have one small idea, if I may suggest. Now, if the spokesperson at the base is intelligent enough, the ignorance of the journalist is a very good, opportunity for this officer to spread the news that he or she actually wants. Why? Because the journalists tend to ask very stupid questions which are not relevant to the case in point. In which case, this officer has all the liberty to spin the story the way they need it. Basically, what I'm saying is that the journalist provides a lot of gap, a lot of space for this person to fill in. If the reporter is shrewd, if he knows what he or she is talking about, that gives the leeway for this armed forces officer, or very little leeway for this armed forces to respond. Ignorance is actually bliss for this armed forces, if I may put it the other way around. Because the other person is just unbleak clay, the services can model it the way they want. It's ready material. It just has to be spun very well. Storytelling is an art, and I think the armed forces should learn this art as well.
I agree with you. Definitely, I agree with you on that. Yeah, very nice talk, Mr. Ramakrishnan.
Thank you, sir.
So one more last question. Can I ask one more?
Yes,
can you wait, Mr.
Yes,
some of the gentlemen has one question. After that, we'll give you a chance. Who is it?
Anand here.
Anand, okay, go ahead, Anand.
First of all, fantastic, well done. So, two questions. One is a kind of an observation. So, pardon my ignorance if something I may not be aware. Happy to get it. Initial slides, I had electronic warfare, and then the third item was cyber warfare. So, when I think it's a question of the presentation topic versus the actual concept. I think both should be combined when it is media and information, because electronic warfare is a completely different field and dimension. When you talk about media and information, I think electronic and cyber go hand in hand. Segregating will completely create another dimension, just what my observation was when that slide was put up. I may be wrong here, I don't know, feel free to correct. And Second item is very closely related to where our Air Marshal Sir just commented. Print media is predominantly still there in India, especially when you said every village knows what happened at Kargil. So mobile is being used by millions, no doubt, but print media still stands, at every village and district level. What Dainik Jagran may be printing versus what a WhatsApp guy sitting in Delhi may be saying, completely different versions of what people understand. So that seems to be a slightly left out as such as print media in India in the current context. We may be very different 20 years from now, but I think that piece is kind of missing. That's where I would probably loop in what our Air Marshal Sir said, that when there are 10 journalists scribbling away in shorthand with what a public spokesperson is addressing, what they understand would be completely different because some of them represent print media. That's where I think my suggestion is a fine line should be drawn with such interactions because it's a mixture. There is an AV cameraman having a live coverage. There are 10 other journalists representing newspapers, local, national, international, scribbling away in their notepads. So that's where this ignorance part, what he mentioned, and the way they interpret as it is, and the way they print eventually, three stages: interpretation, their transformation, and publishing. It's a three different levels completely. So I think there we need to differentiate and then have a fine line drawn so that what is being said and what it should mean actually gets printed. Because we are not completely out of the print media. That's my second and final observation.
True, I agree with what you say. If I may suggest about the first point, the reason why I kind of demarcated electronic warfare, cyber warfare, and information warfare, the perception management part of it, psychological warfare, is because when I covered electronic warfare, I was talking about battlefield, like countermeasures, countermeasures, surveillance systems, and so on. So it's purely battlefield electronics, not electronics that we use today. When it comes to cyber, yes, again, it talks of information systems, it talks of battlefield computers, C4ISR, and that area of the job, right? But when it comes to psychological operations, that's where the media plays the greater part. Now, yes, if you're talking of websites, right? The Army's website, Navy's website, the Air Force website, yes, that also brings into the level, that also brings into scope cyber warfare. But since my talk is specifically with regards to the media, I kind of kept that out.
Okay, fine.
Information warfare is a humongous topic, and I did not cover terrorism at all. I only spoke between the government and the private media. Again, when it comes to Doordarshan, it's a different story, right? Because their relationship with the government's at a different level. So yes.
And in the print again, how does someone control investigative journalism to the extent that they investigate without having any access to any of the official spokes department and persons that you've listed, and then go on to print something? That control is kind of loosely held or maintained, is my observation.
I tend to agree, but
and then it also goes against somebody if objections come out, saying they immediately use the aspect of saying, oh, it's against the fundamental thought speech expression in our country. So there is always a conflict there between knowing something, doing it on your own, printing, and then somebody officially who has the ownership of that to object and then counter objections. That should be got rid of or reduced eventually.
That's again a very difficult topic. I mean, it's something that can be debated. It's a humongous question of its own. So yes, I mean, see, as Captain Ramachandran said, right, every officer signs an oath of secrecy. There are certain things they can say officially. There are certain things they cannot say. Why do you think the AGDPA was brought into the first place? If you notice what the then Chief of Army Staff, right, General Bipin Rawat said, he says it's impossible to control soldiers from using social media. I'm quoting him because it's there on the media. It's there in various news sites. You cannot tell a soldier not to use social media. There was this very popular case, right? I do not know which regiment. I think it was from the BSF, where this Jawan says that we get rotten parotas for breakfast, no chapatis, cold tea, blah, blah, blah. He was going on, raving on. Now, if this is a bona fide soldier, an actual soldier, or not somebody just donning a uniform that he got from some bazaar, this gentleman has actually maligned the character of the armed forces by saying that soldiers are given shoddy food, shoddy breakfast, right? Something very, very fundamental. Now, this is the actual question that Bipin Rawat raised. So he says you cannot control the soldiers. There's only certain guidelines, right? Anybody can voice their opinion, right? We are voicing our personal opinions here on this platform. But then there is an official opinion, there's an official thing that has to be said. The DPR, the Director of Public Relations, was not able to do it professionally because they were still old school when it comes to the media. So you had the ADGPA, right? So you see them very active on Twitter, very active on Facebook and on other channels, when they tend to be a little more modern in their approach. Look at the style of news. And this is also very important because the type of content that they put is very different from old school thinking. They put interesting images, they put very interesting quotes, they give juicy tidbits of information. It's not always about conflict. They share a lot of interesting stories as well.
And they're making excellent videos also.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, a small case in point. About 10 years ago, when the army was advertising its recruitment videos, they had this question: "Do you have it in you?" as the last punchline. That did not go out well with every citizen. So the army has now changed its tack. What kind of videos do you find? You see videos which show a brilliant career option, says that the Navy gives you a wonderful lifestyle. It shows beautifully uniformed school children getting into a bus, celebrating, saluting a well-decked officer. It shows people, it says that, which company gives you a six-wheel car, although without air conditioning, shows a young officer driving out the tank. It shows people flying UAVs and saying which job allows you to play games while on the job. No, they're changing the very way in which an officer's actual life is, right? They're presenting a rosy picture, which is probably making it very interesting. If you trawl a lot of YouTube videos now, right, channels like SSB, Crack, and so on, it shows all this in a very, very positive light. So the armed forces in general actually is kind of tending to understand how the mindset of the viewer is. It is no more a question of do you have it in you. It's a question of, guys, I know the private world is giving so much, right? You tend to earn a lot more money sitting in the confines of your home, but the armed forces gives you more, right? That's how the Navy ends. The Navy gives you more. So they're kind of tending to change with the audience, and that's a good thing.
Thank you so much, Ram.
Yeah, Mr. Kannan Chakravarti, you had another question? Please go ahead.
Ramu, I have a question.
Hey,
Oh, sorry. I mean,
Let
yes.
me continue after that. Let him finish after that.
The entire information of the defense ministry, defense services, is it passed on to the defense ministry, or is some information held back?
I would like the veterans to answer this because I really do not know that. My common sense, if I may put it that way, would say that obviously not.
I'd like to ask a question.
I believe the Raksha Mantri most probably would be entitled to a lot of information, but everything I am not sure. I don't think so. That's my personal opinion, but I would leave it to the veterans to answer that.
As a common sense factor, I would say, the information that is required to go to the ministry will go. I don't think that every other minutest details the armed forces are going to share with them, which may not be required. I mean, that's what my understanding is.
Okay.
Yes, Brigadier Mohan Bharadhan, sir, your question.
Yeah, thank you, Ramu. I'd like to speak to Mr. Ramani. He just spoke about two things. One is about do you have it in you? I thought that was the most wonderful catchword when it actually came out. Recently, Mr. Ramani, you will probably bear it out with me. There's an instance where 44 people from the National Defense Academy have dropped out. I feel that they dropped out because they thought that life in the armed forces was a very, very great and relaxing kind of a job. And they decided to join for the pay and for the lifestyle. When they suddenly realized that it's a totally different kettle of fish, even at the training level, where you're not having any example to set. You set your example when you become an officer in the front line. Now, before that, if 44, that is 10% of the intake of the National Defense Academy has dropped out. This happened just a few days ago. If this is what they talk of, it is much better that they leave now than later on get attracted to the armed forces. We are not trying to attract anybody. They should know what it's all about. They have something called patriotism. There is something called motivation. We want only those kind of people. And I can assure you, we have them in our country. And if properly motivated at the college and school and other levels of education, I have no doubt at all that our institutions will be full and we'll get the right type of material who are prepared to stick their necks out to defend this country.
May I speak, Captain? Mohan Menon.
Yeah.
May I speak?
Yeah, please.
I like to support what Bharadhan had said for the simple reason that I have experienced it. A friend of mine, we were in the directorate in Delhi, 1983, and the Singh had started the insurgency a little active. My friend went to Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and there are areas where the highest number of people used to get into the army. He came back with, after visiting about 8 to 10 engineering colleges, came back with only 3 volunteers for SSB. So there was a big discussion in Naval Headquarters. There was a party. So I found all the technical guys and director of personnel all in a heated this thing. So I was going by. I said, "What is this tamasha going on, sir?" I asked. He said, "No, only 3 people volunteers for the defense. Nobody is there." I said, there were quite a few brilliant officers standing there from Indian Institute of Science, BHU, couple of IIT Kharagpur guys, couple of IIT Kanpur guys. Then I told them, if 4 of you clowns can join armed forces, I can find 20 of them to join. Then they said, "Will you go and select?" I said, "Yes." So immediately I was taken to the director of personnel and said, "This man will go and go to wherever it is." I was sent to some UP area, some Bihar and Punjab, of course. We were a bit scared. I had a wonderful officer by name Jagdish fellow. He was a Sardarji from Delhi and he had a turban. And he had brought a movie also about the adventure side of Navy, more like a diving, sky, everything about the Navy, a short thing. So I spoke about them and I gave my life, what I did in the service, my education. And he showed this movie. Then we told the same thing what he just said. Only people who have got something in them to do something extraordinary, or you have a spirit to service. Service is really tough, but there is a lot of fun. And as luck would have it, we had a good ex-serviceman group in Chandigarh and Kurukshetra and all. And he had already linked up with NCC officer. We were always called. So we invariably made it a point to go to the reception. And always we had a drink and came back. We always told the HOD that we'll come 1 hour late. We were at 3 o'clock. When I come back in the evening, 3 o'clock, he will say, "Sir, another 60 more want to be interviewed." So many places I had to stay back. I got 140 people for SSB. And that was the largest number of batch which joined Navy. So I feel, my friend, what he did is, he said, Naval mess is like a 5-star hotel. Oberoi is not so good. Look at our mess. We have got club, this and all that. And hardly anybody joined. This is our salary. So they all laughed. I said, "Look, I'm in a strange place. I don't belong to Punjab, but look at the bonding I have. If you retire from L&T or Hindustan Liver, do you think any manager coming here, somebody will call you for a cup of tea? Nobody. Here I am. I cannot. Every day, evening, I have to go to somebody's house. And this is the bonding we have. And this is there. I can't understand. I can't explain to you what is this OG blood in each service officer. If you have it, join. And it's not money. It is adequate money. You see, we live well. Very well, and we know how to value money. We cannot lavishly. We don't go to 5-star hotel, but we do go once in a way. So I personally support the right material. If you come, you don't need too many officers. I have seen in 9 Sikh LI, you quoted some retired colonel. I have been there. My Nibi was the commanding officer. He had 2 officers, good for nothing. One is his adjutant. He doesn't even come to the Gurdwara. He just stands outside. Then he said, "This is the kind of material I have. You can warn him. There's a guy who will not reduce his weight because his wife didn't have a second son. He didn't have a son, only daughter. He's just eating and drinking." So this is what happens. So what is the use of having numbers? You need quality leadership, good soldier. Like the old saying, one gun which fires with 100% accuracy is better than 100 guns firing with 1% accuracy. I would prefer to have one dedicated officer than 3 deputies under me. I always had one officer. All the riffraffs, I said, please take them away. Don't need it. I put some extra effort. That's more than enough.
Mohan sir, I believe you told the story very well. You inspired the people, and that's how you brought them in. My only point was that the army needs, or the services need to tell the story well.
Only that time. Only that time. We don't need numbers. We need quality.
Absolutely, but you need the quality consistently.
Yes, yes, it is. You will get it. If
Exactly.
you find 10 people are court-martialed and you find them misusing their transport and you are staying in a civilian locality, what respect will you have?
True,
And
sir,
if you come to me only for liquor bottles, what do you think I am? Some kind of a liquor merchant? I don't give a bottle. I told them, no, sorry, come and have a drink, any amount of drinks in my house. I don't give a bottle. Even to my father, he wanted to distribute. I said, no, you have it, but you can't sell mine. No, never. And one friend of mine asked me, gave me 3 bottles. I said, give me your credit card. It was in Bombay. He just got a, what is called entertainment allowance. He said, I'm going to take 4 of my friends to Taj Hotel. Give me your credit card. He said, no, how can I give? Then I said, how can I give my privilege to you? As simple as that. Hey, you are highly principled. I said, no, that's a rule. I stick to it. If you want to have a drink, come to me. Otherwise, join the uniform.
it's very unfortunate that people see their Fauji friends to be sources of alcohol.
One more thing I want to ask you. Have you done a comparison of the information technology used by various armies? For example, I heard General Altaf Hussain always telling the Pakistani side, he was quoting how effective their Directorate of Public, the Inter-Services Public Relations is. And we have got veteran officers here who are good in media, good in writing. One is the coordinator here, Captain Ramachandran. His writing style is fabulous. And we have got enough people who can communicate well, who have been in it, who have seen the life, and who are balanced. I'm sure Army has enough of these people, especially war casualties. You bring them up and be honest about it, and we have done it. We need not hide anything. Nobody is going around killing people. We hate killing. We are not violent, but we are brave. We use force, control force. And have you done a comparison of different army communications and which you find is the best? United States or UK or China?
If you ask me, okay, sir, let me put it this way. Communication for what? Because every communication has its purpose, has its set audience. If you're talking of conflict, Americans have made as many mistakes, probably more than Indians have. There's no doubt in that. I mean, there are examples and galore in this regard. But if it comes to the way they project their armed forces, I think they've done a much better job. Look at the way they project their forces. Do we have a communication specialist in our forces, in the ranks? They do. Let me give you a very small example. Malabar operations, right? The Malabar exercises that happens very often, right? Amongst the friendly navies. One which is going to happen now again. Look at the quality of photos they tend to take and look at the quality of photos we have that our Navy website puts up, right? I mean, these are very, very small, very, very tactical examples that I'm giving you. Let me give another example. Look at the relationship that they have with the cinema industry, the Hollywood with Hollywood, vis-a-vis our relationship with Bollywood, right? Look at movies like Executive Decision. I'm just naming just off the cuff things that are coming into my mind now. There are so many movies which actually tend to inspire you or which tend to tell you the honors or the greatness of the US military. That is psychological operations in one way, perception management in one way. How many movies have we made? This is something that Captain Ramachandran sir often brings, discusses in the WhatsApp group. Right? The way we tell stories are very bad. The armed forces can spin probably a better story. There are good ways in which movies can be done. And movies are very, very powerful tool in building and maintaining perception of the public. Why is it that the West is able to do this better? Why are we not able to do it?
Can I add something on with Ram?
Can I answer, sir?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, you see, I've been hearing this and it's a very interesting thing. All of us do this business of media, information, everything based on culture. right? Our culture is not tuned to the Western way of thinking and doing things. Our culture is not also tuned to the way of, the Chinese way of doing things. Our media approach is far different from what, uh, others are. While I generally agree with the speaker in what he has spoken about media, armed forces hesitancy in interacting with media and things like that, but I think that's a thing of the past to a large extent. You can always quote isolated examples of this thing. I think we've moved into an age, all of us in the armed forces, where we have to start looking at media as part of your influence operations. I think we have to go beyond giving handouts and all that. And I think we've already done that. I mean, let me be very honest with you. I'm part of that story. I mean, half of the articles which I write today are being, told, look, why don't you write an article on, what India is doing with China? So it's not as if we're not doing something which is supposed to be done. And then the second part of the story, as far as media, is public opinion. In building public opinion also, I think we've done a fair job, right? Whether you want to influence China or not. I mean, just take the whole idea that Chinese are today very, very wary about our media. Nothing like Indian media to get under their skin. How does that happen? So there are two sides to the story. When someone says that we are bad at media, I don't agree. If someone says we are not very good at media, I agree.
Sir, how would you probably rate the scenario when it comes to Kashmir or the Northeast?
Look, you have to understand that a government has to be formal, right? You just can't say what you want. Whereas informal systems like terrorists or religious extremism, their method of communication, their method of propagation is far different from yours. You can't do things which they do. You can't go illegal. You can't do dark ops the way they do, right? You're not an authoritarian system. You're a democratic system, right? Information is something which you can't share freely. Because at times when you share information freely, you're liable to prosecution. So there is a different side, the second side of the story, right? Media wants information. Media is media hungry, information hungry, right? But there are ways of doing it. I mean, I wouldn't say there are limits to what you can do. And like what the Air Marshal had said, it's a very valid thing. You can't just give information to a guy who doesn't know what he's talking of. He's the worst weapon. Let loose. He's a misguided missile. He can talk what he wants in the media. All he has to do is change a few sentences of what I've told about the Jaguar aircraft. He'll make it look as if it's a toy which can be bought in the erstwhile Moor market.
That means that the gentleman is already biased.
Yeah, I can't help it, no. But that's what, see, media is not a holy cow. It's part of our society. People like you and I come from our society only, right? So there are, while I appreciate whatever you have said, I couldn't attend the first part of the presentation because I was involved in another webinar. But since Captain Ramchandran sent this message to me, I said I must come and attend this. And, we are evolving. That's the larger message which I want to put across to you. We might not evolve the way US has done. We might not evolve the way China has done, but we are evolving. This is my take on it. And that's how it is. And no system is best. Huh? China, despite all its efforts, has come a cropper in putting across things to the world. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
So these are all, iffy things, nebulous issues. Each country handles media the way it feels it is best for them. At the end of the day, media is not an independent kind of a society which can run the country, right? It is part of the country.
True.
And that responsibility media at times doesn't have.
And Ramji, quick comment on, because you compared the movie making, right? So why can't we do this? I would say there's a complete difference in the level of investment that a director and producer in the West does compared to anybody in India. Things have improved. You see the quality of movies drastically improved in the Surgical Strike movie that came out. But by and large, as We just heard, the culture and the objective of the movie is completely different.
True.
For example, I'll give you a simple example. The 2004 Hollywood movie Alexander the Great. 1,500 Moroccan soldiers or some of the actual people participated. They were given about 6 months of training as they should be as a Macedonian phalanx formation. They were given all of that. Then the different movie scenes were shown. In Brad Pitt's role as Achilles, he was given expert training by a swordsman. Somebody expert in using swords as a, So the level of investment is completely different, and the objective completely is different. So you are trying to project in India, say a war movie, say border, what we did with the Pakistanis is fine, but that gets diluted because you try to use the best cast into a different dimension, and you make money out of it. So there is a lot of fluidity between the objective, the level of investment between what we are doing here and how Hollywood tries to do. Russian movies, if you watch, much more realistic than American movies. I've seen a lot. Some Chinese, Korean movies you watch on Korean War, they are much more realistic in effects than even Hollywood movies. I told this to the captain a few months back when we were discussing about the Saturday movie thing. So there's a big difference in the amount of investment that they do in how to bring realism, how to project their armed forces, and how public sees their armed forces. When I was working in GE 2001, I visited their office in the US. So we just happened to be in one of those gatherings, and then they had called upon a gunnery officer from the artillery to address something to some occasion there. Because I was part of them, they had taken me down to that ballroom and all. You should have seen the 1,000 GE employees assembled. They just stood up in rapt attention when the gunnery officer, Sergeant Barnes or something, I vaguely remember 20 years ago. So he spoke for 2 minutes on the podium, and there were loud applause and all coming. So that being present there in the US gave me an insight of how an average employee who has no head or tail, knows nothing about weaponry and all of this, even military history of US perhaps, not even their own geography well, I can work for them.
Very
How they view their military, that is amazing. I think that paradigm shift is needed. That's the objective which Captain explained through this See Colors of Glory, which we're trying to have the average citizen understand that. But yes, coming back to your comment on movie making, drastic change is needed.
Ram, I would like to add one thing about this movie making. You're saying it is because I had a long chat with a producer who really wanted to make a movie. So when I suggested, what would be the 71 based on 71 history, I told him you create a movie produce a movie on Battle of Basanta. And then I told him what this battle was about, because I thought from whatever research I had done, that was the most ferocious battle of 71. Ultimately, he said, no, I cannot go ahead with this because there's a lot of money and people won't see it. What I'm saying is the mindset of the people here, unless there is romance, some heroine, like you saw in Border, that is what they made a mess of it. So that is, these producers are investing a lot, they got it because of the mindset of the audience. That is another problem. It's a big question which you said, the Hollywood movies and Indian movies. I realized, I understand.
Sir, may I just add to what Ramji said?
Yeah.
He said the quality of films taken for the surgical strike very good and all that. I personally feel instead of just releasing it, you should have done it secretly, snippets. Secret travels faster. If I tell you, don't tell anyone it's a secret, it will get much faster mileage than anything else, which others don't have. I remember I used to be frustrated about change of ship during 71 war. We were on the western side and everyone thought action is on the east. So I kept getting requests for movie, transfer, and our ships were named after K. Keltan, Kavarati, like that. So one day I got so irritated. One guy by name Kapani came and said, sir, allow me to go. I want to get some award. I want to get married to a beautiful girl. So I said, why are you going? You are getting posted to Khadolkhaj, INS Khadolkhaj, because that is the only name which I came to know. Then I said, there was a big rumor that Russia is transferring some ship in the mid-sea and all that. Mind you, after about a month back, when I was walking back from the dockyard, my coachmate come running and tell me, I said, why don't we haven't met for ages? I'm coming home. I'm coming to a ship. I have to talk to you something very seriously. And he's murmuring in my ear, I have been appointed as electrical officer of INS Kadol Kutch. I put a straight face and walked off. Just gave this news, and then I was worried. In those days, spreading rumors was very criminal. And I said, no, don't worry, I'll teach you everything. But he never came. So I found the way you pass the information, there's also a way to do it. You don't just give press information, surgical strike, this, and finally people get fed up. You are just boasting. No, you don't reveal it. You say, yes, we did something, and we will tell you at appropriate time. The media will go berserk. Then you keep leaking these beautiful photos which he talked about of the films. Go ahead. That's my view. I don't know what you say, sir. Ramakrishnan.
Wonderful.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Wait a minute. Okay. Danesh, come on. Let's have
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, we have seen that in the Azerbaijan and the Armenia conflict that the Indian media is making pro-Armenians but not Azerbaijan, whereas we have more business deals and like proper relations with Azerbaijan. Similarly, with Taiwan, we have, the media is trying to make it more official. So as you know, in coming years, the media will become very powerful and it will become a giant hub of psychological warfare and other things. So do you think that media will also take over the diplomacy?
Very murky waters, my friend. I would suggest you read this book called Manufacturing Consent. A very popular author, excuse me, the gentleman actor, there are two people who authored that. Just keeps my mind right now. But the name of the book is called Manufacturing Consent. And he speaks of a very wonderful concept, which I kind of see actually being true. The media is not a neutral organization. In the sense, it's not independent. More often than not, they have certain understanding, certain relationship with various other organizations, industries. Now, why do you think the media is supporting Azerbaijan, or why do you think the media is supporting Taiwan? Is there deeper waters there? Is there any financial dealings with these countries? Is there any business interests related to these countries that the media wants to kind of showcase in a better light?
They're just going with the trend.
What's the trend? The media creates the trend. Do you and I know what's happening? No.
Exactly.
Does the government tell us anything? No. So who's creating the trend? It's the media. And why should the media create a trend? Because there is something that the media needs to serve, right? There are certain other vested interests that the media needs to serve. Now, I'm not saying the media is a culprit. I'm not saying media is like Shakuni or even like Narada, right? If I want to kind of give it a personality. All that I'm saying is that nothing is pure vanilla, plain vanilla, right? There's always a flavor added to it. There's always a reason behind why a media does a certain thing. And if you have time enough, resource enough, and the courage enough, yes, that's a wonderful story to explore. But I would sincerely suggest read this book called Manufacturing Consent.
Yes, sir. Sir, and one more small question.
Yeah, make it small. Yeah.
Like during the Cold War, there were many kind of KGB defectors and kind of CIA going into the KGB. Do you think it is a propaganda or was it really done? Like we have Yuri, this guy Gagino, who said that the people in America, they are evolving. After a few years, there will be a conflict. You just search in YouTube, you'll find it there. His 15-minute video clip. I don't know, I was shocked after seeing it.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions, or shall we sort of call today?
I have one point, with your permission.
Yeah, please.
I would like to submit to Ramakrishnan that I, for one, I gave a couple of points. I am in no way an expert on media. It is all gathered my opinion on what I read, like any stupid opinion you see in newspapers. But what I felt is, I the people who are in the media do have, or those who are charged with it, whether it's Information Ministry or Indian Information Service or the army officers who are charged with it. Some of them are very good writers and their interaction is also good. Some may not be up to the mark. It's quite okay. I feel their constraint and their inputs, we don't know. And there are certain things which I have seen, they have done quite right if you read about it. So basically what you said is everything is possible, everything needs improvement. And there is scope for improvement, introducing more psychology, this thing, input from, then there are a lot of contribution from retired officers. Just now we heard General say about his article, blog, which are very popular. In fact, it comes through IIT website, it comes through Kerala Catholic Association website, where all it goes, whatever he writes. And it comes back to me through 3-4 sources. It's a very good thing. Sure. And now it has become caught on and very meaningful, intelligent writing. So I personally would like to say that we evaluate ourselves. I am sure they must be doing it and see where we lack. And people like you can always send an article or something to suggest improvement. If they like to hear better things, let them do it. I, for one, dare not even suggest because I am nobody in a media to suggest anything. You know, I have no experience.
Okay. Thank you, Ram. It was an excellent. What is that? So, a brilliant. I mean, it generated so much of discussion that itself shows the talk was interesting and a wonderful one. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go for the national anthem now. Give me 1 second.
Thank you so much, Captain Sir. Thank you so much, Ram.
Thank you. The national anthem was played properly.
Thank you. Yes, it was.
Yeah, because my share screen technology always scares me, and it's okay. The Vignesh wasn't there, I was doing it. So yeah, thank you very much. I mean, all those, I mean, General Shankar, Brigadier Mohan Bharathan, all of you participating in that discussion. And Karnan Chakraborty, he was here, I know he's still there. Wonderful. I mean, the interactive session at the end makes it more interesting with various opinions being sounded. Yes. So Ram, that you have scored a point on that. You have brought something which made people react a lot.
It's a very sensitive topic, sir.
Very sensitive topic.
Yes.
Mohan asked very searching questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
True, sir. True.
And the point Brigadier Mohan Bharathan was saying, right. I mean, I also thought of that. I mean, you have it in you. That was a solid, but somehow it has been removed for commercial considerations. That's what I must I mean, present good life being the other was the real question. I mean, I understand.
Captain,
Yes.
I was listening to our late defense minister, and he was CM of Goa at that time. He was on a drive to Bombay, and he found there's a big board in Marathi which says, if you are unpad, it's a crime. If you are illiterate, it's a crime. So when he met the Maharashtra chief minister, he said, if somebody could read that, that means he is not an unpad. So what's the use of that board? Now, I want to tell you how we misuse our DPR or our funds. There's a 2-page ad in Hindu, in English, all the forms with columns and sections and all that, just like a magnified computer print. For recruitment of sanitation housekeeping staff.
That's right.
This is called our, what we call as topers in the Navy, and many people joined topers branch thinking that it is secret service. There was a novel called Topaz. So we had somebody from BSc graduate who joined topers, and I have an electronic engineer. I took him under me once. He was a topers. He joined because he left BEL, and when he went for recruitment, this was the only vacancy. Topers will join. Only after coming, you knew your highest quality is using the right chemical for the toilet cleaning. And you assist the sanitary engineers in holding his tools. And you can't change branch. Though I did help a couple of them to change branches. Many officers didn't help. Sad thing. So the advertisement says in English medium, advertisement say recruitment, and the requirement is 8th standard, need not know English, at the 8th standard attendance. And just imagine who from the city will go for an 8th standard attendance. It's meant for villagers and particularly targeted. And what is the use of that so much of crores? Each page is, about 5 lakhs in Hindu. 10 lakh advertisement for they wanted 25 sanitary workers. So that's it. I mean, I felt like if I could meet some army chief or something, I thought I should tell the Navy chief. I never got a chance to tell him. I said, what nonsense you are writing.
That's the problem, sir. The wrong story to the wrong audience.
No, it's an application form. Forget about a small thing. Help. If you know anyone interested, please ask them to join. 8th standard pass only is required. It's a different thing in English. I can tell my servant.
It shouldn't even be in the Hindu, sir.
It never happened.
The local newspaper.
Mohan, we need to have dinner.
Sure. Oh, you are welcome. I'm not holding you back, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody. I mean, it's been a very interactive, interesting session. Hope you'll all be there for our next event. Also, we'll be announcing soon.
Yes, sir.
Most probably the next one, unless I get another speaker, I'll be doing it myself. I'm planning to do a event on Northeast insurgency, which is old story now, but there is many things new about it, which I personally know, which I sort of...
Swami sir, I request you to critique my whatever I said. I love it.
I enjoyed whatever you said, Mohan.
You send me a mail. I'll be most grateful and obliged.
Okay, thank you very much, Mohan.
You must
very
be.
well,
And
very well done,
Captain,
Ram. You've done a very good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
It is excellent. I mean, that is
excellent presentation. Yes,
it has generated so much of discussion.
Generated a lot of. Yes, that's more important.
Ours is not a formal thing. It is informal, We have unlimited time. But of course, like Ramakrishnan Swami, people go to dinner also.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you very much.
Good night, sir. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good dinner, Krishna Swami, sir.
Good night, and I'll have a good dinner.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I felt opportunity doesn't wait, dinner can wait.
Danesh,
yes,
lockdown is still in force. Don't go to Azerbaijan now, okay?